Hello. All right. Good morning, everybody. Happy Thursday. Lost track there for a minute. A little. All right, so we are Inspired Outcomes. I'm Tara. This is Alan. That was Alan. Now it's an empty space. Ah, it's Alan again. Okay. And we welcome you to these live sessions that we're doing online. So we are both live on my Facebook and Alan's Facebook, and we also do a Zoom call on our website for people who are not on Facebook. So we've been doing these 11 o'clock NLP sessions where we're just trying to do the little bit that we can do in this confusing time. We're offering a place where people can come and just hear a different perspective. So we're both NLP practitioners, master practitioners, and Alan and I work every day with people dealing with life stuff, and our approach is to use NLP, timeline therapy, and hypnosis. And so we're just sharing, we're taking a little, slice of a topic every day, and we're just explaining a little bit about how we would use our tools to approach it, and hope that you may find it helpful.
So just as a goofy aside for my benefit, I'm not normally in front of a camera every day like this, and every day I notice, and I normally have very short hair, so every day I notice my hair is getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and I'm wondering, can I get a virtual haircut? Is there a haircut by numbers? I wonder how we do this. I'm looking at Tara. Would you cut my hair? Online, live. Well, to go live. Oh, this is a relationship session. You should cut my hair, and we should see how this goes.
Yeah, we put together an idea table.
Yeah, that'd be fun. I want to start the session with a quick review of the emotional state management tools we've shared, and then tomorrow we're going to give the fourth one. So the emotional state management tools start with breaking state. And we break state. My favorite break state tool, other than say squirrel, is to have a person look up and see their mobile telephone number or their telephone number on a billboard. And I have them describe. And now the other day when I asked you guys to type in on the chat line the description of your billboards, there were some fascinating ones. Good on you. And so you see your telephone number up and then you read it backwards. Right? And that actually changes the thought from a highly emotional place to a very cognitive place. And it instantly breaks a negative emotional state. So I encourage you all to practice that. See your number, read it backwards. You can do it any time of the day, anywhere. Just look up, see your number, read it backwards. And then you can play with it. Those of you guys who love cats or dogs, you can have your cat jumping from one to the other, or as cats do, knocking them over, right? Cats are incredibly agile, but when they want to knock stuff over, they knock everything over in the house. So just play with it, have fun with it. That breaks the state. The next thing to do is then while you're looking up, go into peripheral vision. And peripheral vision, the way we teach it, is to see everything, stay focused on a particular spot, but see everything in front of you. Tara likes to do her moose hands. I'm in jazz hands. Moose antlers. And then as you do that, start to hear all the sounds around you, in front of you, beside you, behind you. And we can hear cars going by in the background. Somewhere over there, there's 3 little children playing. Yeah, and as you do that, then you can start to feel everything. You feel the surface you're sitting on, feel the surface beneath your feet, feel your breathing where it is, feel your body temperature. And if you stay there long enough, you'll notice your breathing rate start to slow down and drop from your chest into your diaphragm. And that's a very calm, very, very relaxed state. It's actually a beautiful gateway into meditation. It's a very quick way to get in a highly meditative state. And then the last piece is to, hold on please, is to fire your anchor. Just to fire a positive emotional anchor. Now I hope since we shared how to anchor the other day, all of you guys have been anchoring in. I think that would be a beautiful thing. So the best states to anchor in are naturally occurring states. So if you're laughing or smiling, if you're watching YouTube comedy, right, and it's making you laugh, then anchor that in. So 3 steps: break state, go into peripheral vision, and then fire your positive resource anchor. And that'll help you to change states instantly. Thank you.
You need to borrow a basket of bunnies.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Into that state, we can provide that for you.
For those of you who like little creatures, we will maintain social distancing. We will put the bunny outside the door. You can pick them up.
We're not joking. We did it last night.
Yeah.
All right. Cool.
Where you go?
There we go. So we promised, I'm just going to put my coffee down because I can't. Okay, so we promised that today we are going to address relationships. So we're just going to demo is what we're going to do. We're not even going to speak. So many of you, like us, may be in a situation where you are suddenly dealing with your relationship in a different way than you have had to before. So most of us get accustomed to whatever your regular routine is, right? So for most adults, I've probably meant most adults, you tend to go your separate ways during the daytime. You have different jobs, or one of you is working, one of you's not, or you're both at different places. You come together and you have, your evenings together, your weekends, that sort of thing. This 24 hours a day together stuff, if you guys are dealing with that, and of course you're not all, but some of you are, is going to be an adjustment. So we have two areas of expertise on this. First of all, we have NLP tools that we're going to share with you. We also happen to work together and live together and parent together. And so this is kind of, we're just, life hasn't changed.
This is our wheelhouse.
Yeah, hasn't changed too much for us. So here's the things that I'd like to bring to the table. So first of all, relationships all boil down to communication. So primarily we're talking about, relationships with your partner, but this is also really, really relevant. All of this is relevant for those of you who may be wanting to tune up their relationships with their parents, with their siblings, with their friends, with their children. Any relationship with your work peers, any relationship in your life is going to benefit from paying attention in these ways.
This is important in your personal relationships, but in your larger circle of relationships, as we go farther and farther into this COVID-19 event, you will see that people may become, they don't have to, but they may become more polarized in their position, and they may be more willing to express their position adamantly and openly. And in that way, if two positions appear that are in conflict with each other, you might see things escalate faster now than you would have a month ago, 2 months ago, 3 months ago.
So one of the things that's most important in a relationship is to feel heard, to feel understood, to feel seen. Whatever resonates with you most. There's an awareness, though, that the person you're in relationship with, we all feel better when we feel as though they understand us at some level, that we're respected, that when we speak, that it's actually being received in a way that allows us to feel like we're with a compassionate person, or we're with someone who genuinely cares about our opinion or our feelings. And so when we say it boils down to communication, we all know that we have different ways of using words and using language.
We said earlier that we don't describe our world in the words we use. We actually experience our world in the words we use. And we're talking here this morning in the context as English is the first language, but this applies to other languages as well. Regardless of what your first language is, what we're about to share in terms of how we speak is transferable into other languages.
And we also have filters going on. So there's our language that we're going to speak to specifically, but there's also filters in our brains. And each of us is either born or nurtured, that you can have that argument later regardless. We're all in a place where we receive all the information that's coming into us through these filters. And each of us has a preference. So it's usually an unconscious always an unconscious preference. Yeah. Of which information to pay most attention to. So we've spoken before about how you can only receive information with these 5 senses. The olfactory and the gustatory sense don't tend to be primary in humans. They don't tend to be our predominant filter.
People don't walk around describing their world in smells and tastes all the time.
I mean, you might every once in a while, but not often. So what we're really going to work with is either visual, auditory, or kinesthetic. And so visual people, what that means is that the information coming into your brain is being filtered, and more attention is going to be paid to the visual stimulus around you. The auditory people are going to have a dominant auditory filter, right? So
and they'll be focused on the sounds.
Are going to be really, really predominantly important to them. And the kinesthetic people are people who really feel their environment. They feel the sensory stuff that's coming in primarily. We all, of course, do all three all the time, right?
Absolutely.
But the dominant one in some couples and in some relationships can actually present conflict, especially in times of stress. So when we fall in love, we tend to fire at all levels. So when we are in a really positive relationship, when you're with your best friend, or when you're falling in love, when you're in these like really kind of wonderful beginning relationships or continued relationships, you fire your visual, your auditory, your kinesthetic, it's all going at once.
Guys can relate to this. If we're falling in love, we actually shower, we shave, we put on clean clothes, we put on aftershave. So we look good, we smell good, and then we're all about feelings, right? We buy gifts and we touch. So guys are really good at doing all three, visual, auditory, and kinesthetic at the beginning of a relationship.
And we're really open to the other person. We're in this moment of curiosity, right? You're really interested in the person, or if you've got a mentor that you really look up to, you're interested in them. So you're paying more attention to words when maybe you wouldn't before, or tone, or you're really paying attention to the feeling you have and all that stuff. But what happens over time is that life settles in, right? So you end up with your first challenge in your relationship.
And unconsciously, you go to your primary visual, auditory, or kinesthetic. And so just as an explanation, you're looking at a couple where I'm very visual, I'm visual and then kinesthetic, and Tara's not. Tara's auditory and then very kinesthetic, or kinesthetic and then very auditory. And so when we first met, we would talk late into the night, and which was beautiful. Now we get into a more of a routine in life, and I like to do visual things. I like to go fast. Tara wants to sit, talk late in the night, and I want to get in the car and drive fast.
So we end up with these default positions, which just by virtue of living life, you're going to end up more in your dominant preference.
Absolutely.
And then when things get stressed, so if you get into an argument, or if you get into a difficult place with the person you're in relationship with, even more so, you're going to go into your primary sense.
When we're all in a good place, we translate easily. If Tara's talking in auditory kinesthetic language, she says, it sounds to me like this, and I feel because of what I've heard this. My brain translates that into images, and I accept it, and we have a good communication because everybody's calm. Your brain, our brains, everybody's brain can translate visual, auditory, and kinesthetic in the moment. It's when we become stressed that we really get locked into our primary communication modality.
So I'm going to give you a really quick example here that we always offer our prac courses because it's a really good example of how this can sometimes create conflict, even unknowingly. I called Alan once. I was somewhere, I was in Nevada. And I called him, and I was really nervous about something that was going to be happening. I had to present something, and I was really nervous about it. So I called Alan, and I wanted Alan to help me just, get calm and get grounded. And I was expressing to him how worried I was and what I was worried about and everything. And Al interrupted me at one point, or in a pause, said, "What are you wearing right now?" And my response to that was so confused, because I didn't, to me, it felt like he hadn't heard me, of course, right? He hadn't heard what I was saying. But what was going on there, what we were able to figure out, unfortunately, we were both, doing NLP, so we could work through it. But for Alan, he wanted to see in his mind the environment that I was in and how I was doing. And he knows that I dress according to how I feel. He also wanted to be able to visualize it so that he could help me. And he could say, okay, so but he first had to get the details to be able to see and visualize what was going on for me. Where, of course, to me, it was so irrelevant, right?
She said, you don't hear a word I'm saying. You don't know how I'm feeling. Well, of course, I couldn't see it yet.
I do hear you. I do know what you're saying. And I'm saying, well, how could you? You didn't even you didn't even respond to what I was saying. Yeah. And so you can imagine, you've likely had this happen in your life where Alan was hearing me. And if I moved through that, we would have got to the place where I could have got the help I was asking for. So what I would suggest is pay attention to your partner or your, whoever it is that you're going to use these tools with, and listen, because it can feel really, really comfortable when you start to notice if one of you is saying, you never hear me, and the other person is saying, but I see what's going on for you. You feel like you're not hearing or seeing,
guys,
hearing each other, but you are.
And guys, this isn't subtle. This is not subtle. If you're a dominantly visual speaker, so I often talk in visual predicates, I describe everything in color, shape, sizes, right? And if I'm in an argument with an auditory person and they're talking about sounds, when we're fighting, when we're in a conflict, we get locked in, and it's not subtle anymore. It becomes like Swahili talking to English. One person says, you don't know how I feel, and the other person says, you don't see my point of view. And the conflict gets bigger and bigger. And as Tara said, now if you can step back, if you listen to yourself and you're talking mostly in visual predicates, and your partner's auditory or kinesthetic, if you can just slow down and re-express back to them in their modality, they will feel heard or seen or felt appropriately.
The other place this really is important to remember is in our environment. So for a kinesthetic person, for instance, it may be now that you're all of a sudden at home and your environment may now need to be your work environment, or you're all in close quarters or whatever. For a kinesthetic person, it's going to be really, really important for them that it feels right. So for them, I can tell you, being a high K person, where it doesn't really matter to me what it looks like. Like if you took a picture of it, does it visually, make sense or whatever? It has to feel right for me. For somebody else, where they may have a really visual person who may have been able to be okay because they're only in their house for a certain number of hours, and when they're there, they're focused on other things, but now they're in an environment where visually they need things to look a certain way for them to feel okay. And what will often happen, or the sounds in the house, right? For one person, they can just block things out. For another person, they can't block it out. And what will happen with couples is that they'll start to argue and try and get the other person to see it their way or to experience it their way. And that is never, ever going to work. If you are a kinesthetic person and you're forced to be in a space that isn't feeling right to you, you can't be convinced by a visual or an auditory person why it's okay. And so I would encourage you just to check if that's what's going on, if you are having any conflicts, and check to see if what's happening is one of you needs to recognize the preference of the other and then modify accordingly, right?
Yeah, so as an exercise for the next couple of days, or I would encourage you forever, when you're listening to another person speak, listen to their words and ask, do they see or do they hear or do they feel their world when they express it? And just see if you can match their language. It's really fun, and it slows down judgment. And it actually makes you more present in the moment in the communication. It makes you more present, because if you're in your own modality and you're already ahead of the conversation thinking about what you'll say in return, you're not present. So when you focus on your partner or the person you're in communication with words, you are present, and they will feel heard, felt, and seen.
Okay, the next thing we're going to talk about are meta programs. So if you were to take an NLP course with us, there are, 19 meta programs. We're going to talk about 4 of them today, because we don't have a lot of time, but also because we think these are the 4
that you could really benefit from.
Yeah, that really play a part in relationships. So I'm going to list them first, and then we'll talk briefly about each one. So the first is chunk size. So each of us have a way of communicating. Some of us speak in very detailed, not just speak, but experience the world in very detailed ways. So
very
down to the small bits, right? It isn't the car that's broken. It's the front hub wheel thing. I don't even know how to do it.
Why would you pick a car?
I don't know.
Why would you pick a car?
But it's the detail of the thing. They don't want to hear about the overall plan for the day. They want to hear about the details. Other people are big chunk size people.
So when the car is broken, they would say, I have no transportation.
Yeah.
Transportation being a big concept.
The fact that it's the car or the wheel is less relevant to them.
I have no way of moving. Yeah. I have no transportation.
Chunk size, we'll talk about that in a second. It's really important to understand about yourself and about the people you're in relationship with. There's also inferential and literal people. So some people are very, very inferential. And so if they're in contrast to somebody who is experiencing the world and expressing themselves literally, this can create unnecessary conflicts over and over again. And then there's a filter of whether you pick up things, the sameness of things or the difference of things. Yeah. So for some people, the world looks, they just notice all of the connections out there, all the stuff that's the same. And other people are the opposite. This can cause strife in relationships. And
they pick up everything that's different.
And the final one is whether you are internally referenced or externally referenced. And so we'll start back up at the chunk size one and just we'll spend a minute or two on each one. But I would suggest sort of taking some notes on this and we'll
so you can go from very small chunks all the way up to very big chunks. And when a person's speaking, if you listen to them and say what size of information that is. So using Tara's example, if someone came in and said, oh, I'm missing a nut on the right front wheel, that's very detailed, right? So you know that you should probably respond to them at the same level of detail. Meet them where they are. Enter their model of the world. Oh, when, so ask questions about that. If they come in and say the car is broken, well, that's chunked up a level, right? The car is broken and you can meet them there.
So what often happens with couples or relationships is that, we may meet after a few hours, in the middle of the afternoon and say, how's your afternoon going? For somebody who's really chunked up, the answer may be, it's going really well. Got a few bumps here and there, but it's going really well. That's a true, honest, real answer. But to a chunked down person, they may feel as though their question has been dismissed. They may feel as though the person doesn't care enough to answer or just is deliberately not giving them the information they're seeking. On the other hand, when the chunked up person says, how's your day going? And the chunked down person responds and says, well, I had my shower this morning and there wasn't enough hot water because everybody in the house is now showering. And then I got breakfast and goes into the details. The person who asked the question who's chunked up, all they were looking for is like, are you doing okay? Are things okay? And they may feel as though they want to withdraw. They don't want to ask questions anymore because they just get overwhelmed by all these details to them that are not important.
And now when they don't ask questions, the detail person doesn't feel heard, felt, or seen again. Exactly. That the big chunk person is just not interested. And then the big chunk person says, I don't dare ask a question. That level of detail is overwhelming to me.
It can actually create confusion because for a chunked up person, unknowingly, they will often kind of like zone out when the details are coming at them, which again, you can imagine in a relationship, the chunked up person, the detailed person has given all this stuff, all this information, the chunked up person just doesn't process that way, so can't really hold it in. And the next day, you guys have all probably experienced the arguments of like, but I already told you, I told you this is what we were doing, but the chunked up person just like, right? So if you can find ways around this, if you happen to be in a relationship where you're both chunked up or you're both really detailed, then good for you. This is probably going to be one where it actually creates a lot of really great communication for you. But if there is a difference, and usually there's a slight difference, this is really useful to pay attention to and either address it or, learn to speak to the other in a way that's going to be more helpful.
And I'm going to suggest to everybody that one of the chunked up answers we hear a lot is the word fine. I'm fine. When you get that chunked up answer, ask more questions.
Yes. So then the inferential and the literal. So this is a meta program. Meta programs, by the way, we can't go into a big explanation, but these tend to be some of our deepest filters. So
how we filter the world, right? We can't deal with all the information that's coming in. These are some of the filters that allow us to deal with the enormity of the information we're being bombarded with every day.
And each of them has a really, really beneficial use in some context and not as much in others, and vice versa, right? So inferential, if a person is inferential.
I can show one more thing. These are all continuums as well. They're not either or. So you might be a small chunk or a big chunk, but there can be people all along the continuum. So now we're talking about inferential people or literal people. Again, it's a continuum. You're not either or. You can be anywhere on this continuum.
Inferential is somebody who, when they're asked, if you said to them, "Are you thirsty?" there would be an immediate assumption that there must be an offering of a drink, or there's
more meaning. There's more meaning.
There's more meaning than just the question.
Yes.
Someone who's literal, if someone said, "Are you thirsty?" is going to just answer the question.
Yes or no.
I am or I'm not, and not necessarily take it beyond that. So in relationship, if one person is inferential, so if somebody says, what's a good example of this? We do it all the time.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of fun. My mother-in-law is Tara's mom. It can be very literal, especially around mealtime and that. She'll say, "Alan, can I get you something, water or whatever?" And I'll say, "No, I'm good." And she'll say,
"What does that mean?"
And she'll say, "But do you want a glass of water?"
He'll say, "I'm good."
I'm good.
She'll say, "Do you want a glass of water?" He'll say, "I'm good." She'll say, "Okay, I'm glad you're good, but do you want a glass of water? Yes or no?"
Very literal.
Whereas for Alan, it's very clear that if he's good, he doesn't need it, right?
Yeah.
So in a relationship, this one can be enormously helpful to realize that your partner is literal, and you've got to completely change the way that you're communicating and the meaning that you're giving to their answers. We'll leave that one with you. We have lots more information on this stuff if you are interested, and we're going to offer free consults.
If you know the person you're in relationship with is literal, then you know their word is what they mean.
Mm-hmm.
If they're inferential and you don't ask more questions about what they mean, you will then lead yourself perhaps to mind reading and come up with the wrong meaning in what they said. So if you're dealing with an inferential person, ask more questions. If you're dealing with a literal person, you know what they say is exactly what they mean.
And then the sameness or difference. So this one is really neat in relationships. So we ask the question, if you look at this wall and maybe there's 5 different certificates on the wall, what do you see? Right, so if we said, what's on that wall back there, what do you see? Describe what you see. The people who see sameness will say, I see 5 certificates.
Or have the same frames.
They'll just tell you what is the same. There's 4 certificates, they're all from schools, you got education, this is success, or whatever. A difference person, when you say, how would you describe that wall?
Each has a different color, each has different fonts.
On the right is from this school, and the one down there is from, it doesn't even occur to them that they are one of something, because they notice all the differences. This is one of our, I would say, in my experience with all of my clients, it's one of the deepest ones. It's one of the ones that we are really unaware of. And so when you're in close quarters, when you're living together, when all of a sudden your relationship is, strained perhaps because there's just so much togetherness. If one person is operating on sameness, you're going to run into things like in organizing the spaces that you're working in, they're literally going to notice how,
everything's good.
Yeah, everything. So the kids are all working here. We're going to set them up here, here, and here. This will work. The person who filters for difference is not going to see it that way. They're going to see well, this person needs this, and this person needs this, and how are we going to arrange to make sure that each need is met? And they're going to work that way. So both people will actually likely get to a successful result, but it's like the difference person is going to come up this way and then get to what works, and the sameness person is going to come this way. And while if they can get to here, we're okay. But while they're here, this can really cause some difficulty in the relationship.
If you've ever set a table for a dinner party, and you're a sort for difference person, your partner's a sort for sameness person, the sort for sameness person will put out, let's say there's 6 people coming for dinner, they'll put out 6 place settings, and they're happy. They're all good. The difference person will come in and start lining up the forks and knives. What? The forks and knives and spoons, placing the glasses in the right thing, because they're sorting for differences. They see the difference. And it's easy to confuse. You think, well, that person wants everything the same. No, they see the difference and they have to adjust it. Mm-hmm. So you'll see restaurateurs where they have a chain of restaurants and they have a code that every table has to be set the same. Their best staff are sort for difference people. They see the difference in the tables, they adjust them instantly, make them all uniform. And so it can be very challenging.
So I would encourage you again, if you find yourself, we've only got a few minutes here, so I know we're rushing, but if you find yourself in a conflict with your partner, just take a step back for a second And if you've made notes on this, or if you can remember this, check to see if some of these things could be the reason why there's a communication breakdown.
Yes.
And I bet you that half the time at least, this is what you're going to realize is happening, as opposed to it being the content or the intention of what the argument seems to be about.
Yes.
It's so much more likely to be about the way that you're communicating, not what you're communicating about.
Yes.
The last one I want to mention real quick here is that some of us are internally referenced, some of us are externally referenced. Most of us are sort of a mix one way or the other. So the question I ask people to figure this out is, if you did a project or a paper or something when you were in school and you did it really, really well, you knew that you had put in the right research and you had done it really well. And when you hand it in, you get it back and you get a poor mark on it. Is your instant reaction, not your behavior after, because that's learned, but your instant reaction, is it to say, oh my gosh, I guess I didn't do as well as I thought I did? Or is your immediate reaction, that guy doesn't know what he's talking about.
I wrote a great paper. Paper's good. Paper stands.
And those of you that are internally referenced are the ones that you know when you've done a good job. You don't need the world to tell you. You don't need the affirmation of others to validate. You know within yourself if you've done a good job or not. Externally referenced people truly aren't quite sure. And as a more externally referenced person, I'll tell you that I can deliver a workshop and I have a good sense. I probably have, a fairly good sense of if it went well or if I felt good about it or whatever. But I'm not going to be 100% certain until I get the feedback from the people attending the workshop who say,
external reference.
Hey, Tara, that was great. If I get enough of that, then I can actually feel confident and say, yeah, I did a great job. But if I get feedback that says otherwise, somebody says, Tara, you were speaking Greek. I didn't know what was happening there. I may have felt like I did a good job. That external reference will actually sway my feeling about it, okay? If you are an internally referenced person that just knows what you want, what you are, how you did, and you are married to someone who is externally referenced, who needs that validation, the temptation is to make it seem as though it's a weakness. As though because they're externally referenced, that they're somehow less strong or less, confident or whatever, and that's not what's going on. And vice versa, the person that is externally referenced, married to someone who is internally referenced, may feel as though their partner is arrogant or is unwilling to listen to other people's ideas or that sort of thing. And again, that's not what's going on.
Now we're talking about relationships today. But put it in a corporate setting just for a moment. If you have a person who's in customer service, if they're internally referenced, they will not do a good job. And a customer service person has to be externally referenced. They have to be constantly checking with the customer, did we do a good job? And have to be open to the feedback. An internally referenced person will argue with the client why the client is wrong. So, that's one example where meta programs they're critical in just one-on-one relationships. They're also powerful tools for building your business. And we've encouraged you in this COVID-19 time to be in quadrant 2 of Stephen Covey and start thinking about how you'll run your business when this is over and how you'll manage your life. So these are great tools to work one-on-one in your relationships with people, but also how to build your business.
So as we were putting together the ideas of how can we in half an hour sort of, talk about the most important stuff, it occurred to us, of course, that we can't. 30 minutes is not enough to go through all of these NLP tools and ideas and thoughts. So what we decided we would do is offer a free consult. So if anybody out there feels like them and someone they're in relationship with would benefit from doing an assessment with us. So we can assess your VAK and we can assess your meta programs. And on our website, so you can go to inspiredoutcomes.ca and book, we have a button that says free consultation. If you click on that and then in the subject line, just write free assessment or free relationship assessment or something like that. You can book with Alan or with myself. Alan has more availability because I am attempting homeschooling. I can't even say it with a straight face. Yeah. But I do have some availability, so you could book with either one of us. And we'll just spend that 30 minutes with you. We can give you an assessment, and then you can get a clear sense of how your meta programs and filters and your partners, and maybe it'll help for you guys to have a more peaceful, loving experience of these next few weeks.
You just want to have your own VAK and meta programs assessed,
Yeah.
hit the link, inspiredoutcomes.ca, free consultation, and book a time. Thank you guys for joining us again. We'll see you tomorrow at 11. Have a great day. See you
Alan,
later.
I just wanted to answer some comments in the chat. Can you guys hear me? Alan, did you just hear me? I'm just trying to answer some comments in the chat. So if you guys just want to wait until you end the meeting, I'm just going to answer some questions here from Kim and from Althea. And I'm going to give you guys the link so that you can actually book with Alan and Tara right now.
Thanks, Sam.